There's some issue with the system, I guess. Okay, so we will start with a case scenario. A 38-year-old woman with a history of recurrent urinary tract infection is having burning pain on urination and urinary frequency since past 4 days. On physical examination, her temperature is 38.9 degrees Celsius, pulse is 70 per minute, respiration is 15 per minute, and blood pressure is 130 by 82 mm of mercury. So tell me, what is the next investigation that you would like to perform on this patient? Anyone? Yes, urine analysis. For what? Why do you want to perform urine analysis? Because the patient is having a history of recurrent urinary tract infection and now she is presenting with burning pain on urination and urinary frequency. Plus, you can see her temperature is also slightly raised. So, all these findings point towards that the patient is having another bout of respiratory tract infection. Okay? Oh, sorry, urinary tract infection. Something is wrong with PowerPoint presentation. Just a second. Okay. So, what are the indications for urine analysis? The most important indication is any suspected renal disease like glomerulonephritis, nephrotic syndrome, pyelonephritis, or renal failure. Then urinary tract infection, as we discussed in the case scenario. Then detection and management of metabolic disorders like diabetes mellitus. We all know that we do chemical tests to detect sugar in the urine. Then we can also use urine analysis for the differential diagnosis of jaundice, that is, which type of jaundice is there, whether it is hemolytic jaundice, whether it is hepatocellular, or whether it is obstructive jaundice. Then for the detection and management of plasma cell dysphagia, like multiple myeloma. Then diagnosis of pregnancy can also be done by taking a urine sample. Something is wrong with this PPT. I'll just close it and reopen it again. Yeah. Okay, coming on to urine analysis. We all know that it is a simple and rapid diagnostic test, and the results are available in short time. So to perform a urine analysis, the first step is collection of the sample, because the sample has to be adequate in terms of quantity and quality, so that the test results are specific. Okay. And later on, we can do physical, chemical, and microscopic examination. So we'll discuss in detail about the collection of the sample. So before that, you should know the normal composition of the urine. So the normal volume in a healthy patient ranges from 600 to 2000 ml. The specific gravity ranges between 1.003 to 1.030. Okay. Osmolality ranges from 300 to 900 milliosmol per kg body weight. pH ranges from 4.6 to 8. Glucose and protein are negligible in a normal urine sample. Okay, these values, normal values, you should remember. Why? Because then only you can interpret whether the findings are normal or abnormal. Okay. Now, collection of urine. So the various methods of collection are listed here. The most commonly sample that is taken is the first morning midstream sample. So what do you mean by the midstream sample? That means initial fluid drops are discarded and the later half of the sample is collected. And first morning means when the patient wakes up in the morning, he collects his first sample, first voided sample. And why is it preferred? Because the first voided sample in the morning is acidic and has preserved parts or cells, if any, present. Okay. Then random midstream sample. Random means it can be collected any time of the day. And midstream, I've told you. Then the other sample that you can take is first morning midstream clean catch. So one new term is there in this clean catch. So as you can see, this sample is required when you have to do a bacteriological examination. That means the sample should be free from any contaminant so that it can physically detect if any infection is present. Okay. So how do you collect a clean catch specimen? In males, the glans penis is exposed sufficiently and then it is cleaned by soap and then the urine is collected. Similarly, in females, the labia are separated, the urethra is cleaned with a soap ball and then midstream sample is collected. Okay. Postprandial sample means 2 hours after having a meal. So this sample is used for the estimation of glucose and urobilinogen. Then 24-hour sample. This type of sample may be required when you have to do quantitative estimation of proteins or hormones. And how do you do it? You tell the patient that after getting up in the morning, the first urine is to be discarded and all the urine voided subsequently during the day and the night has to be collected in a large bottle with a cap. And the next next morning sample also has to be collected. So this becomes a 24-hour sample. Now this sample should be preserved at 4 to 6 degrees Celsius so that it does not allow for the growth of bacteria and other contaminants. Okay. Then you can collect catheterized sample also if the patient is catheterized, and it can be used for bacteriological examination in infant bedridden patients and if there is any obstruction of urinary tract. Then in infants and incontinent adults, you can collect the sample by tying a plastic bag around the genital. So how do you preserve the urine sample? The usual method that is used in most of the laboratories is refrigeration at a temperature of 4 to 6 degrees Celsius. Then you can add several chemical preservatives like hydrochloric acid, toluene, boric acid, thymol, and formalin. Now coming on to the urine examination. Okay. Now case 2. A 68-year-old man produces colorless urine with a urine output of 3 liters per day. So what is this condition known as and what are the possible causes? So first tell me, is this quantity of urine output, is it normal? Yes, Shashwat. This is known as polyuria. Yes, it is not normal. Vivek, you are right. Yes, Sanjeev, you are also right. Very good. Okay, when I am opening this control panel, my buttons are not working. Okay. So the normal volume we discussed, average 24-hour urinary output should be in the range of 600 to 2000 ml. So this patient is excreting 3 liters of urine per 24 hours. So it is known as polyuria. So urinary volume more than 2000 ml per 24 hours is known as polyuria, and it is seen in conditions like diabetes mellitus, diabetes insipidus, chronic renal failure, or if the patient is on diuretic therapy. Then what is oliguria? When the urinary volume excreted by the patient is less than 400 ml per 24 hours. It is seen in fever, acute glomerulonephritis, congestive cardiac failure, or dehydration. Then there is a term known as anuria. So you have to remember the difference between oliguria and anuria. Anuria is complete cessation of urine output or a urinary output of less than 100 ml per 24 hours. And it is seen in conditions of shock, acute tubular necrosis, hemolytic transfusion reaction, acute glomerulonephritis, and complete urinary tract obstruction. So the normal color of urine is pale yellow or amber color, as we say in the book. And it is because of the presence of the pigment urochrome, right? This urochrome is derived from bilirubin, right? So it has to be pale yellow. What in the case that we discussed, the patient was excreting colorless urine, right? So colorless urine is seen when the urine is diluted, seen in the conditions as we discussed. Then red color can be seen in hematuria, hemoglobinuria, myoglobinuria, or porphyria, right? Then dark brown or black color is seen in alkaptonuria and melanoma. Brown color is seen in hemoglobinuria. Okay? So if hemoglobinuria is occurring, the urine color will be either red or brown, right? If the color is yellow, that means the urine is concentrated. You must have experienced it when you are dehydrated. The urine color becomes dark yellow. Then yellow, green, or green color is seen when biliverdin is present, right? Then deep yellow color with yellow foam is seen when bilirubin is present in urine, right? Orange or orange brown color is seen when urobilinogen is present. Milky white color is seen when chyluria is there. Normally, freshly voided urine should be clear in appearance, right? Foaminess appears when there is presence of excess proteins or bilirubin. So, what are the conditions in which you do not get a clear urine? Is when amorphous phosphates are present, or amorphous urates are present, or first cells or bacteria are present. So, if first cells are present, the urine will be of turbid consistency. Okay. What is the odor of the freshly voided urine? It is typical aromatic odor. And after long standing, it becomes ammonical because of the breakdown of urea present in urine. And what are the abnormal odors that you can find? Fruity odor is found in ketoacidosis and starvation. Mousy or musty odor is found in patients suffering from phenylketonuria. Fishy odor is found in urinary tract infection with protease, okay, or in tyrosinemia. Ammonical odor is found when the patient is having urinary tract infection with E. coli, okay, or old standing urine. Foul smell is found in any urinary tract infection. And in cystinuria, the odor will be typically sulfurous. Okay. So what is the specific gravity of urine? So I have told you the normal range. So why is it important? Because it measures the concentrating ability of the kidneys. And what it is actually, it is the comparison of density of urine against the density of distilled water at a particular temperature. Why I'm mentioning the temperature is important? Because temperature can lead to increase or decrease of specific gravity, right? So for the specific gravity, you should know that as the solute concentration will increase, specific gravity will increase, right? And when the temperature rises, the specific gravity will decrease. So these two important points you have to remember. If solute concentration increases, specific gravity increases, and when temperature increases, specific gravity decreases, right? This is very important because it is asked in your Viva question. Now these terminologies, this also you have to remember. This is asked in your Viva because urinalysis is a part of your practical examination. So what is hypersynuria? It means there is increased specific gravity of the urine of the patient. So I have told you if any solute is present in the urine, it will lead to increased specific gravity of the urine, right? So in diabetes mellitus, glycosuria, albuminuria, fever, dehydration, what is happening? Specific gravity of the urine is increasing, which is known as hypersynuria, right? Whereas in conditions like diabetes insipidus, pyelonephritis, diuretics, and alcohol, what will happen? There will be hyposynuria, that is, the specific gravity will decrease. Then isocynuria, this is a very interesting term, and it means that the specific gravity of the urine of the patient is low and it is fixed at 1.01, right? And it is seen typically in cases of end-stage renal failure. So what happens in end-stage renal disease? The kidneys lose the ability to concentrate the urine. So that's how these kidneys will produce a urine which has got a low and fixed specific gravity of 1.0. Now this instrument is kept in your when you come for your practical Viva. This you will find in your practical tray, and you have to tell what is the method to determine the specific gravity, right? So listen very carefully. What you have to do, you have to fill a measuring cylinder with 50 ml of urine, and then you have to lower the urinometer gently into the urine, and you have to let it float freely. See, this is the measuring cylinder, right? And inside you can see a urinometer. So when you are lowering this urinometer into the urine cylinder, you have to make sure that it does not touch the side or the bottom of the cylinder, right? And then you have to take the reading of specific gravity on the scale, and you have to look for the lowest point of meniscus to take the reading. यहाँ पे मार्क होता है reading, not visible in this picture. यहाँ पे मार्क होता है, ठीक है? Then you have to take out the urinometer and immediately note the temperature of urine with a thermometer. Why temperature is important? I have told you that for every 3 degrees Celsius rise of temperature, you have to add 0.001 from the specific gravity, right? So if the temperature is rising, you have to add, and if the temperature is decreasing, you have to subtract 0.001. Then the other methods for determining the specific gravity are refractometer method and reagent strip method. So refractometer method में क्या करते हैं? Basically इसमें क्या करते हैं कि you just measure the extent of refraction of a beam of light which is passed through urine, and what happens? If solute is present, there will be more refraction and there will be increased specific gravity. Okay, so this is an indirect measurement. Reagent strip method में क्या करते हैं? This strip, which is shown here in the diagram. My cursor is not working properly. हाँ, ठीक है. तो इसमें क्या करते हैं? This reagent strip method, it measures the concentration of ions in urine, and this correlates with the specific gravity. So depending on the ionic strength of urine, polyelectrolyte will ionize in proportion. Okay. So ionization will lead to change in color of pH indicator, and the pH indicator used in this is bromothymol blue. So you have to remember the pH indicator, that is bromothymol blue. I'm telling you all these questions which are asked in your Viva. Okay, so please pay attention. Coming on to the pH. So pH, you all know, it measures the acidity or alkalinity of the urine. And the point which you have to remember in this is that it should be a fresh urine, right, for the correct estimation of pH, because if it is an old sample, the urea is broken down to ammonia, and which leads to change in pH, right? Normal values range from 4.6 to 8. pH depends on diet, acid-base balance, water balance, and renal tubular function. And how do you do it? By litmus paper test or pH indicator test. Okay. So litmus paper test में क्या होता है? Blue litmus will turn into red if the pH is acidic, and red litmus paper will turn into blue if it is alkaline. So a small strip of litmus paper is dipped in urine, and the change in color is noted, right? Then what happens in pH indicator paper? In this, there is already a indicator present, which is bromothymol blue and methyl red, right? Now this reagent area is dipped in the urine sample, and the color changes compared with the color guide, which is provided with the strip. So acidic urine can be found in ketosis, diabetes mellitus, starvation, fever, UTI by E. coli, and high protein diet. Whereas alkaline urine can be found in severe vomiting, old ammoniacal urine samples. I told you now, on long standing, the urine sample becomes more alkaline because of presence of ammonia, which is because of splitting of urea present in urine. Then in chronic renal failure, UTI, then vegetarian diet. Coming on to the chemical examination. Okay, so case 3 is 18 years old male patient with type 2 diabetes mellitus. Sorry, it was supposed to be type 1 diabetes mellitus. Presence in emergency with vomiting, rapid breathing, and fluty breath. What could be the cause and what findings will be present in the urine examination? So tell me, what is this patient presenting with? Yes, very good. Sheetal, Vishwa, Vivek, Purna. Yes, all of you are right. So this patient is having diabetic ketoacidosis. Right? So what do you expect in the urine of this patient? This is type 1 diabetes. It has been typed as type 2. Very sorry for that. Okay? So, since the patient is having diabetes, you will find sugar in the urine, and since the patient is presenting with diabetic ketoacidosis, you will find ketone modules. Whenever I open this control panel, my key stops working. Okay. So in the chemical examination, we will be discussing how to determine the proteins, glucose, ketone, bilirubin, bile salts, spirobilinogen, blood, and nitrite or leukocyte esterase in a urine sample. In practical exams, you have to perform the test to detect proteins, glucose, and ketone. But you should be knowing the methods for the rest of the substances also. Okay. So normal protein in urine is up to 150 milligrams in a 24-hour sample, right? Above this cutoff limit, it is known as proteinuria. Okay. Now these proteins can be proteins from plasma, which is albumin, or it can be derived from urinary tract, known as TAM Hospol protein, or secretory IgA. Then the proteins derived from tubular epithelial cells, leukocytes, or other desquamated cells. So proteinuria is defined as protein excretion in urine of more than 150 milligrams per 24 hours in adults. So remember this. This you have to tell when the examiner will ask you what is proteinuria. You have to tell this limit, cutoff limit. Okay. So types of proteinuria, it can be glomerular or tubular. Glomerular proteinuria is because of increased permeability of glomerular capillary wall, which is seen in nephrotic syndrome. Then tubular proteinuria is because of the excretion of low molecular weight proteins, which in a healthy person are actively reabsorbed by the proximal renal tubules. But when the tubules are damaged or diseased, these are excreted out, like in acute and chronic pyelonephritis, heavy metal poisoning, or tuberculosis of kidney. Then there is a term known as overflow proteinuria. This means when the concentration of a low molecular weight protein rises in plasma, it overflows from the plasma into urine. That means the tubules are not able to reabsorb it completely because the concentration is too much. For example, immunoglobulin light chain of Benzone proteinuria seen in plasma cell dysplasia, or hemoglobin. When intravascular hemolysis is occurring, then hemoglobin starts appearing. Then myoglobin in skeletal muscle trauma. Okay. And lysozyme in acute myeloid leukemia. Then there is a term known as hemodynamic proteinuria, which is because of the alteration of blood flow through the glomeruli causing increased filtration of protein in states like high fever, hypertension, heavy exercise, congestive cardiac failure, seizures, or exposure to cold. Then post-renal proteinuria is caused by inflammatory or neoplastic conditions in renal pelvis, ureter, bladder, prostate, or urethra. That means any site except the kidney. So that's why it's the name post-renal. Now coming on to the test for protein. The test that you have to perform here is the heat and acetic acid test. The principle. Very important. You have to remember the principle and the method. Correct method. How to do it as well as how to interpret your result. So listen very carefully. Okay. The principle is that these proteins are denatured and coagulated when they are heated. Okay. And a cloud-like white precipitated form. How do you do it? You have to take 5 ml of urine in a test tube. You have to take a 5 ml test tube and you have to fill it with 2/3. So why 2/3? I'll tell you why 2/3. Okay. उसके बाद, after filling the test tube with the urine, you have to acidify it with a few drops of 3% acetic acid if the urine is alkaline. Then now this is the answer why you have to fill it 2/3, because you have to boil the upper portion for 2 minutes and the lower part will act as a control. Okay. So remember, when you are heating this test tube on the flame, you have to heat the upper portion only and not the lower portion. Otherwise, your control will be lost. Okay. So upper part is heated and you have to see if any cloudiness is appearing, and you have to control from the lower part. ठीक है. ऊपर heat करोगे तो ऊपर cloudiness आएगी and नीचे वाला part will be clear, right? So that acts as a control. If precipitation or turbidity appears, again you have to add 3% acetic acid few drops. Why? To differentiate it from phosphate. So if this turbidity or precipitation disappears on addition of acetic acid, it is because of the phosphate, right? And if it persists, it is because of protein. So now you can say that yes, this turbidity is because of protein. So this test is semi-quantitative and it can be graded from traces to 4+ depending upon the amount of protein. So here you can see the grading. If there is no cloudiness, it is said to be negative. Faint cloudiness is traces. In semi-quantitative test hai, so we can tell the amount of proteinuria also, right? Then cloudiness without granularity is graded as 1+, which is equivalent to 0.1 gram per deciliter of proteinuria. Then granular cloudiness is 2+, equivalent to 0.1 to 0.2 gram per deciliter of proteinuria, right? So remember, the unit over here is gram. The common mistake that you do in your Viva is that you, instead of gram, you start saying milligram. You get confused. So remember, it is gram per deciliter. Okay? And precipitation and flocculation is 3 plus equivalent to 0.2 to 0.4 gram per deciliter. Or thick solid precipitation is 4 plus, which is equivalent to more than or equal to 0.5 gram per deciliter of proteinuria. Then there is Heller's test method. इसमें कुछ भी नहीं है. You just have to take 5 ml of urine in a test tube and you pour concentrated nitric acid without touching the sides of the tube. And what do you observe? You observe a white ring at the junction of two liquids when proteins are present. Okay? But you don't have to perform it here, but you should know what the name of the method and how it is. Then nowadays, reagent strip method is used. The reagent area of the strip is coated with bromophenol blue indicator. So remember the indicator name, reagent name and indicator name of all the strip methods that we are discussing here for various. ठीक है, जो भी हम डिस्कस कर रहे हैं इसके लिए, like this is for proteins. I told you for pH also. So you have to remember the name of the indicator. So what happens in this? This indicator is buffered to an acidic pH, which will change color if the proteins are present. Right? So this is the color coding. Okay. And in this, you can tell what amount of proteinuria is present. Microalbuminuria. This is urinary excretion of 30 to 300 milligrams of protein per 24 hours, which is equivalent to 2 to 20 milligrams per deciliter of urine. Okay? Of albumin in urine. So why is it known as microalbuminuria? Because it is not detected by the routine methods of detecting proteinuria. Okay? So strips of detecting microalbuminuria are available separately. Okay? And what is its significance? That it is the earliest sign of renal damage in diabetes mellitus. That is diabetic nephropathy. So this is an important entity. Okay, quantitative estimation of protein in urine is done by albuminometer method. ठीक है? This instrument is also kept in your Viva tray. ये जो तुम्हारा इंस्ट्रूमेंट वाला ट्रे होता है उसमें ये रखा होता है. You have to identify this instrument and then the examiner may ask you the method also, that how do you estimate. Okay? उसका नाम होता है Beck's albuminometer. And how do you do the quantitative estimation? You have to fill the albuminometer with urine up to this U mark. Then you have to add Beck's reagent up to the R mark. This R mark. Okay? Then put the stopper, mix it, and let it stand for 24 hours. Then take the reading from the level of precipitation in the albuminometer tube and divide it by 10 to get the percentage of protein. So here are the markings. Whatever reading you get, you have to divide it by 10. Coming on to the estimation of glucose, the main indication is unsuspected cases of diabetes mellitus or follow-up of known diabetic patients. So I told you normally the amount of glucose excreted in urine is very less and it cannot be detected by the routine test. And the presence of detectable amounts of glucose in urine is known as glycosuria. Okay. So what are the causes of glycosuria? Very important to remember the causes. So don't just try to remember diabetes mellitus, because there is a long list and you have to remember all of these causes, because this is a very common question which is asked in Viva. Okay? So endocrine diseases may you have diabetes mellitus, acromegaly, Cushing syndrome, hypothyroidism, and pancreatic diseases. Non-endocrine diseases may you have some of the central nervous system diseases or liver disorders. Then drugs, very important. Corticosteroids, very commonly used in COVID patients. They lead to hyperglycemia and consequently glycosuria, right? Then adrenocorticotropic hormone thiazide. Okay, is one term known as elementary glycosuria. This is when after taking a meal, there is rapid absorption of glucose from the intestine, and this leads to transient elevation of blood glucose above renal threshold. Okay, so what happens? These patients start excreting glucose in their urine. So this occurs in patients with gastrectomy or gastrojejunostomy and in hyperthyroidism. So यहाँ पे एक टर्म आया renal threshold. So what is the renal threshold? It is the highest glucose level in blood at which glucose starts appearing in urine and which is detectable by routine lab methods. ठीक है? Now, glycosuria without hyperglycemia is known as renal glycosuria. मतलब इसमें क्या प्रॉब्लम है? There is no hyperglycemia. ठीक है? हाइपरग्लाइसीमिया नहीं है पेशेंट को, फिर भी यूरिन में ग्लूकोज आ रहा है. दिस इज बिकॉज the renal threshold has been crossed. So normally in a healthy individual, the renal threshold of glucose is 180 milligram per day. ठीक है? But in some patients, this renal threshold is lowered. So उन cases में क्या होगा कि there will be no hyperglycemia, still there will be glucose present in the urine. Okay. So for detection of glucose, we do Vendic test. What is the principle? Composition. You have to know what are the constituents of Benedict reagent. The principle is when urine is boiled in Benedict solution, blue alkaline copper sulfate is reduced to red brown cuprous oxide if a reducing agent is present. And this reducing agent may be anything, glucose or any other reducing agent. So it is not specific for glucose, right? So very simple method. You take 5 ml of Benedict reagent in a test tube, add 0.5 ml or 8 drops of urine, mix well, boil over a flame for 2 minutes, allow it to cool to room temperature and note any change in the color. ठीक है? इसकी grading कैसे करते हैं? Blue color is no, that means there is no change from blue color. It is sugar is means reducing substances nil. Okay? And trace is green without precipitate. 1+ is green with precipitate, equivalent to 0.5 gram per dl of reducing substance. 2+ is brown precipitate, equivalent to 1 gram per dl. 3+ is yellow orange precipitate, equivalent to 1.5 gram per dl. 4+ is brick red precipitate, which is equivalent to more than 2 gram per dl of reducing substance. You have to remember this grading, okay? Proteinuria and glycosuria. दोनों की ग्रेडिंग पता होनी चाहिए यूरिन में, ठीक है? For glucose estimation also, glucose reagent strip method is available based on the glucose oxidase peroxidase reaction, and this is specific for glucose. जो Benedict reagent test हमने अभी किया, that was not specific for glucose. It will be positive in any case, in anything which is present in urine if it is a reducing substance, right? But this method is specific for glucose and it is based on glucose oxidase peroxidase reaction. ठीक है? इसमें क्या होता है? This glucose oxidase enzyme, it will oxidize glucose into gluconic acid and hydrogen peroxide will be produced, and this hydrogen peroxide along with the chromogen, it will produce a blue color, right? And this test is more sensitive and specific for glucose. Coming on to the estimation of ketones. So the 3 ketone bodies which are found in urine can be acetoacetic acid, beta-hydroxy butyric acid, and acetone. And presence of ketone in urine is known as ketonuria. So ketones are breakdown products of fatty acids. Causes of ketonuria, it can be either because of decreased availability of carbohydrates or increased metabolic. So that glucose alone is not able to meet the demands of the body. So now the body is trying to utilize ketones for production of energy, right? So it can be found in starvation, persistent vomiting in children, weight reduction program, then fever, severe thyrotoxicosis, pregnancy, or protein calorie malnutrition. So the test done for ketone bodies is known as Rothera's test. Principle is acetoacetic acid or acetone reacts with nitroprusside in alkaline solution to form a purple colored complex. ठीक है, इसको करते कैसे? 5 ml of urine is taken in a test tube, then it is saturated with ammonium sulfate. ठीक है, so now you will add a crystal of sodium nitroprusside and you will mix it well. Now liquor ammonia is poured along the side of the test tube to form a layer. And if ketone bodies are present, immediately there will be formation of a purple colored ring at the junction of the two tubes, right? And this you can. Aceta test, tablet test. This is Rothera's test in which a tablet is used. Ferric chloride test, also known as Gerhardt test. This is another method for determining presence of ketone. ठीक है, इसमें क्या करते हैं? Addition of 10% ferric chloride solution to urine causes solution to become reddish or purplish if acetoacetic acid is present. So it detects the presence of acetoacetic acid only. Then there are reagent strips available in the market which can detect the ketone bodies. Coming on to case 4, a 45 years female with choledocholithiasis present with right hypochondral pain, nausea, pruritus, and passage of dark colored urine. So anyone who can tell me what's wrong with this patient? Jaundice, yes. Chati, very good. Sheetal, yes. Obstructive jaundice. So these are all the features of obstructive jaundice. Okay. Okay. So in the indications of urine analysis, we discussed that it can be used to classify which type of jaundice is present, right? So we can do chemical analysis of urine for detection of bilirubin, bile salt, urobilinogen, and blood. But to classify the type of jaundice, you need to know the presence or absence of bilirubin, bile salt, and urobilinogen. Right? These tests you don't have to perform here, but you should be knowing the method. Okay? So bilirubin is a breakdown product of hemoglobin, and its presence in urine is known as bilirubinuria. And if it is unconjugated bilirubin, it cannot appear in the urine because it is water insoluble. It is the conjugated bilirubin only which can appear in the urine. Right? So this is how you differentiate the type of jaundice. If bilirubin is present in the urine, then it cannot be hemolytic jaundice. It can be either obstructive jaundice or hepatosclerotic jaundice. If urobilinogen is present, that means increased in urine, it has to be either hemolytic jaundice or hepatosclerotic jaundice. It cannot be obstructive jaundice, right? So how do you detect bilirubin in urine? There are 3 tests by which you can detect: foam test, Mellin's test, and Lugol iodine test. Foam test में क्या करते हैं? 5 ml of urine is taken in a test tube and is shaken and is observed for development of yellowish foam. Okay. So while discussing with the appearance of urine, we discussed this. If bilirubin is present in urine, the urine becomes foamy. Then Fauchett's test. What is this? This is a very simple and sensitive test. इसमें क्या करते हैं? You have to add 2.5 ml of 10% barium chloride to 5 ml of fresh urine in test tube and mix well. Okay. A precipitate of sulfate will form. You have to filter this and obtain this precipitate on a filter paper. And now to this precipitate, you add 1 drop of Faucet's reagent. Development of blue-green color, it indicates presence of bilirubin. Okay. Bile salts, what are name of bile salts? Cholic acid, deoxycholic acid, deoxycholic acid, and lipocholic acid. So bile salts are the salts of the bile acid. So bile salts along with bilirubin can be detected in urine in cases of obstructive jaundice. Very simple test is done for this case surface tension test. So you all know bile salts are needed for the absorption of lipids, and what is its function? That it functions as to lower the surface tension of the lipids so that they can be absorbed. So this property is utilized in this test. We क्या करते हैं? Some fresh urine is taken in a conical glass tube and it is sprinkled with the particles of sulfur. If bile salts are present in the urine, sulfur particles will sink to the bottom because these bile salts will cause lowering of the surface tension. And if the sulfur particles they remain on the surface, that means bile salts are absent. In this, you have to remember that thymol, which is used as a preservative, it gives false positive. Okay, so you have to rule out if thymol has been used if you are getting a positive. Okay. Urobilinogen can be present in urine. How is it formed? It is formed by bacteria which convert the bile into urobilinogen, right? Normally, a very small amount of urobilinogen is excreted in urine, that is 0.5 to 4 milligrams. Causes of increased urobilinogen in urine, hemolysis or so anything which is causing increased hemolysis, it will lead to increased bilirubin and increased level of urobilinogen in urine. And reduced urobilinogen in urine is seen in cases of obstructive jaundice or if the intestinal bacterial flora is reduced. So what are the tests which are used for detection of urobilinogen? Ehrlich aldehyde test, Watson-Schwartz test, and reagent strip method. Okay, so there can be some instances when blood is present in urine and intact red blood cells are found, which is known as hematuria. The various causes can be glomerular diseases, non-glomerular diseases, or hematological conditions. Coming on to the microscopic examination. So last case, I'll finish in another 5 minutes. A 48-year-old woman has had recurrent urinary tract infections for the past 15 years. On many of these occasions, Proteus mirabilis was cultured from her urine. For the past 4 days, she had burning pain on urination and urinary frequency. On physical examination, her temperature is 37.9 degrees Celsius, pulse is 70 per minute, respiratory rate is 15 per minute. There's marked tenderness on deep pressure over the right costovertebral angle and on deep abdominal pressure. Urine analysis shows pH of 7.5, specific gravity 1.02, hematuria 1+, and no protein, glucose, or ketone was found. So microscopic examination of the urine is likely to show. So to understand this, you should know what is happening to this patient. So basically, this patient has history of recurrent UTI, and now this patient is presenting with marked tenderness on deep pressure over the right costovertebral angle and on deep abdominal pressure. So this is a typical finding of patient having renal stone. Okay? And that is why the patient is also having hematuria. Okay? So what is the microscopic finding of urine of this patient? You will see many RBCs, WBCs, and triple phosphate crystals. Why these crystals will be there? Because this is the typical presentation of a patient with a staghorn calculi. Okay. So in the microscopic examination of urine, you have to look for the cells, parts, crystals, and organisms. For that, you prepare a urinary sediment, which is done by taking a urine in a test tube and centrifugation of the sample at 1500 RPM, and you suspend the sediment in a slide and observe under microscope. Okay. So cells में you can get RBCs, WBCs, epithelial cells or whole fat bodies. Cast में you get cellular or non-cellular cast. Crystals में you can get normal or abnormal crystals, and you can get some organisms also. This is how a uric acid crystal will look. Can be diamond, rhombic, prism or rosette shaped. Okay. It is seen in cases of gout, high purine metabolism, acute febrile conditions, and chronic nephritis. Then oxalate crystals. They look so pretty, like little envelopes or octahedrons. They are found in oxalate-rich food. If the patient is having oxalate calculi, ethylene glycol poisoning, liver diseases, and CKD. Cystine crystals. They are colorless, refractile, hexagonal plates. They can be present singly or in clusters. They are found in cases of congenital cystinosis, or if the patient is having cystine calculi. Tyrosine crystals, very fine and highly refractile needle-like structures, seen in tyrosinosis or severe liver disease. Cholesterol crystals, they are large, flat, transparent plates with notched corners, seen in nephrotic syndrome, nephritis, and chyluria. Triple phosphate crystals, they look like rectangles or coffin lids, seen in UTI, or if the patient is having triple phosphate calculi. Then what are urinary casts? They are formed in luminous tubules of kidney, and they are the result of the precipitation of TAM phosphol mucoprotein, which is secreted by tubules. Plus, it can have some clumping cells or other materials. So the different types of casts that you find are the hyaline cast, seen in renal diseases, granular cast, seen in tubular degeneration like nephritis, then epithelial cell cast, seen in renal disease, blood cell cast, seen in nephritic syndrome, pus cell cast, seen in pyelonephritis, fatty cast, seen in nephrotic syndrome. Why fatty casts are seen in nephrotic syndrome? Because lipiduria occurs in nephrotic syndrome, and this may form fatty cast. Then waxy cast indicate tubular degeneration. This is how a hyaline cast will look like. It's homogeneous, colorless, transparent with rounded ends, seen in fever, strenuous exercise, and nephrotic syndrome. Granular cast is the result of degeneration of cellular cast, seen in acute tubular necrosis, advanced glomerulonephritis, pyelonephritis, nephrosclerosis, and chronic lead poisoning. This is how RBCs look like. If RBCs are present in urine, this is how it will look under a microscope. WBCs under a microscope. Can you see the cell outline and the nuclear outline? These are the tubular epithelial cells. This is present in urine. They look like this under a microscope. Then RBC cast can be seen in acute glomerulonephritis, lupus nephritis, Goodpasture syndrome, renal trauma, or subacute bacterial endocarditis. WBC cast, it can be seen in renal infections, acute pyelonephritis, acute glomerulonephritis, interstitial nephritis, and lupus nephritis. Fatty cast. It is formed because of the fatty degeneration of tubular epithelium, seen in nephrotic syndrome, diabetic glomerulosclerosis, lipoid nephrosis, chronic glomerulonephritis. Waxy cast, these are yellow, gray, or colorless, smooth, homogeneous, short, broad cast with blunt or broken ends. Seen in chronic renal failure, malignant hypertension, renal amyloidosis, tubular inflammation and degeneration, and even in cases of renal allograft rejection. This is how it looks like. And the other structures that you can see are some bacteria, yeast, parasites, spermatozoa, mucus, or fat. So bacteria can be seen in UTI, can be, you can see in this picture also, rods, cocci or chains, depending on what bacteria is present, you can see under microscope. Then you can see yeast forms of the fungus also, most commonly Candida albicans in patients of having UTI, especially in diabetic patients. Then you can see trichomonads also. These are the eggs of Enterobius vermicularis. Okay, so you have to remember the names of the tests which are performed for the chemical analysis of various substances and their procedures, especially protein, sugar, and ketone. Right?